Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Now, while Rodney Alcala was working at the LA Times as a typesetter, he would often go around showing the photographs that he had taken throughout the years. Co-workers would often recall as the pictures being extremely graphic and would be very unsettling, as most of them were not only women but were also children in various stages of undress. Leanne Leadham would recall a time in 1979 when she was 17 when Rodney Alcala would approach her about taking some photos, and would claim that he would tell Leadham that he was a professional, as around the time he was going around telling a lot of people that he was a professional photographer, as when she was 17 she would be a model for some of his photographs. She would even go any further and say that at the time Rodney Alcala would show her his photograph portfolio, where in this portfolio not only would they have a spread-by-spread sheet of girls that were naked, but also teenage boys that were naked as well. In November of 1977, 18-year-old Jill Terry Barcombe, who is from Oneida, New York, would have a vacation or take a vacation in California. And on November 9th of 1977, she would be found on Mulholland Drive in California. On this road, she would be found halfway dressed, being completely naked from the waist down, and she would be positioned from a knee to his chest position. There was clear signs that sexual assault had occurred by the time of her unaliving, and it was also noted at the crime scene that she was asphyxiated with a blue tie rope, as well as beaten with it. They would also find 3 bite marks on her right breast. Now, because of the severity of the crime, investigators and police had originally thought that this was the work of the Hillside Stranglers. And at the time, the Hillside Stranglers had already been apprehended. So when the police would interrogate the Hillside Stranglers about this particular crime, they would not recall this particular crime, so she was quickly outruled as a Hillside Strangler victim. On December 16th, 1977, 27-year-old nurse Georgia Wixt would go missing at the previous night after picking up her co-worker Barbara Gale from a bar. Gale would later tell the police that Wixt would actually pick her up from the bar and take her home. And when she arrived at work the next following day and realized Georgia was not at work, she and her co-workers had a very unsettling feeling, so they would quickly call the police and report her missing. The police would arrive at Wixt's apartment and would find signs of forced entry. There they would find a naked Georgia Wixt, and she had been unalived by asphyxiation with a pair of nylon stockings of hers. She had also been sexually assaulted, and as well as being sexually assaulted, they would also find 3 bite marks on her right breast again, as the previous victim of Barcombe. They would also notice that Wixt's skull had been bashed in and her private parts had been mutilated. They would find handprints around the area that did not match Wixt, and they would take copies of these handprints. Even though they did not have DNA testing back then, they would still take these prints as evidence, which would be very important later on down the road. On June 24th, 1978, 32-year-old Charlotte Lee Lamb, who was a secretary in Santa Monica, who would have an apartment in El Segundo, would actually be found on this day in the laundry room, and she too would be unalive. In the laundry room, she would be naked as well, beaten, and had been asphyxiated with a pair of shoelaces. She would be posed as the other victims, but this time she would be posed in a way with her hands behind her back, so her back was arched up. It is after these 4 crime sprees that Rodney Alcala would then appear on the dating game show, as we had talked about in the beginning of the video. Now, it's not for sure why Cheryl Barcombe would deny Rodney Alcala the date, but it said that the moment they had begun talking to each other, that Rodney Alcala would just give off a very creepy vibe. And as I'd said in the beginning of the video, this would probably be the smartest thing that Cheryl Barcombe had done on that particular night. After the show on The Dating Game, around February 14th, 1979, Rodney Alcala would pick up 15-year-old Monique Hoyt, who was hitchhiking at the time. And just like Tally Shapiro, he would drive her to his apartment where he would take her inside and grape her. After he was done graping her at his apartment, he would take Hoyt into his car and drive to a mountainous area in Joshua Tree, California. He would then make Monique Hoyt get out of the car and undress to her underwear, and he would begin taking pictures of her in her underwear. He would also begin graping her again, and this time would even take photographs of himself graping 15-year-old Monique Hoyt. He would then bound and gag Monique Hoyt and perform more sustained graping on Monique Hoyt, including sodomy. After the graping Hoyt, it's around this time Rodney Alcala would take a giant rock and begin bludgeoning Monique Hoyt in the head. But luckily for Hoyt, she would actually find a way to escape from Rodney Alcala. After Monique Hoyt would flee, it's there that Rodney Alcala would go to a gas station. Monique Hoyt would actually flee to the nearest police station and file a report, where the police would waste no time in picking up Rodney Alcala. He would not have a very long stay in prison because it's around this time after he was arrested for this assault that his mother would actually post his bail. On June 13th, 1979, 21-year-old Jill Marie Parenteau would actually go to a baseball game. She would actually leave work early where she was a computer key punch operator and attend this baseball game. But when she did not return to work the next following day, she was then filed missing by co-workers, and the police would actually go to her apartment in Burbank. And just like with the various other women in this portion of the video, the police would find in her apartment in Burbank signs of forced entry. They would find Jill Marie Parenteau on the bathroom floor, naked and unalive by asphyxiation. She too had been beaten and had also had pillows placed underneath the back of her shoulders as she was posed. But the police would also notice something that was slightly different than the other victims, as they had noticed that the attacker, after trying to leave, would try to leave through a back window and had actually broke through the window and crawled through the glass. And while crawling through the glass, they had realized that the attacker had actually cut himself getting out of the apartment. So they would quickly collect the DNA or blood from this exit point as evidence. And as I said before, this is during the late 70s, early 80s, so the technology of DNA was not as strong as it would be later on down the road. But this collection of DNA would be very important later on down the road. Unfortunately, June would be a fairly busy month for Rodney Alcala, as Jill Marie Parenteau would not be the only victim that Rodney Alcala would attack in that month. As in, on June 20th of 1979, Rodney Alcala would find yet another unfortunate victim. And this victim would be 12-year-old Robin Christine Samshu from Huntington Beach.